I still remember the night my world cracked open. I was 8 years old, barefoot on the kitchen floor, holding a half-burnt grilled cheese in my hand. My little sister Ellie was sleeping on the couch with her favorite stuffed dolphin. And my mother, well, she was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the front door like it had just spoken to her, because he had left it wide open. My father, the man we thought was our provider, our protector, our everything, was gone. Just like that. No goodbye, no note, not even the courtesy of closing the damn door behind him. My mum kept whispering, "He'll come back. He's just upset. He needs space." But something in me knew better. Even at 8 years old, I knew the sound of a final step. The way he moved that night, calm, mechanical, no hesitation. It wasn't a fight. It was an exit plan. A practiced one. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat down at that same table, staring at the door too, wondering if I'd ever see him again. Spoiler alert, I did. But not for a long, long time. That night, my mother put on her bravest face. She locked the door, hugged us both, and said, "We're going to be just fine." She was wrong. Within a month, our car was gone. Repoed. Within 2, we had to leave the house. The one with the cherry tree in the front and the broken fence in the back. Gone. We moved into a single-room apartment on the east side of town. Cracked tiles, leaking roof, neighbors who screamed at night like it was a competition. I started packing groceries at 10. Ellie got to paper route. Mum cleaned offices after her day job just to keep us afloat. And my father, he was sipping champagne in Monaco. Literally. I found out years later. He didn't just leave us, he upgraded. New wife, new kids, new life. He forgot we even existed. But I didn't forget him. And every sleepless night, every skipped meal, every humiliation, I turned into fuel, because someday he would see my face again. Not as a little girl begging him to come back, but as the billionaire who made it without him. They say poverty humbles you. Number poverty sharpens you. It cuts off the illusions and leaves only what's real. By the time I turned 12, I didn't believe in fairy tales anymore. No prince was coming, no miracle check in the mail. Just me, my cracked sneakers, and a mind that refused to break. Ellie used to cry at night. She'd ask, "Do you think Daddy still thinks about us?" I never answered. What was I supposed to say? No, baby. He's probably too busy teaching his new son how to hold a golf club. But I didn't hate her for asking. I hated him for making her ask. At school, I was invisible. Not because I wasn't smart, but because I smelled like mildew. My clothes never fit right. My lunch was always the same, peanut butter on stale bread. Still, I watched everything. I studied the rich kids, how they spoke, how they carried themselves, what they didn't say. I paid attention to the numbers, math, business, economics. I devoured them like candy. Why? Because I knew money was the only language my father ever respected. So I was going to learn it fluently. By 13, I was selling candy bars I bought in bulk and flipping them for profit. By 14, I ran a school-wide tutoring ring. I charged extra for homework assistance. By 15, I was building websites for local businesses from a library computer after hours. And I kept every dollar. Stacked it in an old shoebox under my bed. My mum never asked where it came from. She just looked at me like she wanted to believe this was normal. Like maybe her daughter just had a hobby for spreadsheets and hustle. The truth. I was building something. Something silent, something steady. Something no one could see yet. I didn't want to survive. I wanted to dominate. And deep down, I wanted him to see it someday. To feel it. I wasn't the little girl at the kitchen table anymore. I was becoming someone else, someone dangerous. It started with a headline. I was 16, sitting on the grimy bus to my weekend job at the print shop, when I glanced at the screen of the man next to me. He was scrolling through some financial magazine. And there it was. Real estate, Tycoon. Victor Madden expands luxury empire to Europe. Victor Madden, my father. It was the first time I had seen his face in 8 years. Older, greyer, but the same smug eyes. The same jawline I saw every time I looked in the mirror. He was smiling like life had never asked him to bleed. I remember gripping the seat in front of me, knuckles white. The bus was loud, but my mind went silent. All I could hear was Ellie's voice in my head. "Do you think Daddy still thinks about us?" Now I had the answer. He didn't, not once. He'd become a millionaire off luxury condos and vacation villas, while we'd been rationing powdered milk and skipping doctor visits. I memorized every word in that article. Where he lived, what he did, who he married. Her name was Lacey, blonde, young, rich dad, no mention of his previous family, no trace of us anywhere. That night I went home and told Mom. She didn't cry. She just stared at the photo and said, "That man doesn't exist anymore, forget him." But I couldn't. Not now. He was real again, and I needed to be real to him. So I made a decision. No more just scraping by. I wanted to build an empire, bigger than his, better than his. And not just to say I did it, but to look him in the eye one day and make him realize what he threw away. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to outgrow the pain so loudly that his silence would echo in every boardroom he entered. From that day forward, my life became a countdown. To the moment I'd stand in the same room as him again, not as his abandoned daughter, but as his competition. Most kids my age were worried about prom. I was worried about payroll. While other girls painted their nails, I was painting a logo on the wall of a one-room co-working space I begged my way into. It wasn't fancy. It had flickering lights, a busted heater, and shared Wi-Fi that barely worked. But it was mine, and so was the name on the door, True North Digital. It started with website design, but not the pretty, artsy kind. I focused on local businesses, the kind run by people with no time, no tech skills, and no one else willing to help. I didn't talk like a teenager. I talked like a strategist. I didn't wear trendy outfits. I wore confidence and clean spreadsheets. Clients came fast, faster than I could handle. I stayed up all night, coding with gloves on when the heat died. I taught myself SEO, email marketing, branding, analytics. YouTube was my university. Failure was my tuition. By the time I graduated high school, I had 5 part-time contractors, a waiting list of clients, and over $80,000 in revenue. I still lived in that cramped apartment with my mum and Ellie. But every month, I put more cash in that old shoebox. Then, one night, Mom found it. She held it in her hands like it was made of glass. "Where did this come from?" she whispered. I looked her in the eyes and told her the truth. "I'm building something so big, he'll hear it from wherever he's hiding." She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. "You're not your father," she said. "I know," I replied. "I'm better." That summer, I declined every college offer. Harvard, NYU, Columbia, they all said yes. I said no. Why? Because they wanted me to learn business. I was already doing business. I wasn't chasing a degree. I was chasing a legacy. And nothing, not even the ghost of the man who left us, was going to stop me. Turning 20 felt like crossing some invisible bridge. I wasn't a kid anymore. And more importantly, I wasn't broke anymore either. 3 years after launching True North Digital, I hit my first million. Not in dreams, not in projections, in my bank account. It didn't come from luck. It came from obsession. I had built a full-stack branding agency, not just websites now, but rebrands, product launches, ad campaigns, investor decks. I offered results, not services. And I delivered. People called me the girl who never sleeps. And they weren't wrong. I didn't party. I didn't date. I didn't even buy a new jacket that winter. Every dollar that came in went into expansion. New hires, better tech, smarter systems. I had a team of 15, spread across 5 states, all remote, all hungry. We called ourselves the Quiet Empire, because while others posted selfies and bragged on Instagram, we scaled in silence. And the best part, clients didn't care how old I was anymore. They only cared that I made them money. But there was one moment I'll never forget. Ellie, now 17, burst into my room with a crumpled letter in her hand. "Look," she said, "it's a wedding invitation. From him, my father, getting married again, wife number 3. And he sent one to us. No note, no apology, just the assumption that we'd care." I stared at the invitation, gold lettering, white ribbon, a return address in Miami. And for the first time in years, I laughed, not out of joy, but because the irony was delicious. He still didn't know who I was. Not really, and that was about to change. I told Ellie, "We're not going to the wedding." She looked disappointed until I added, "We're going to buy the hotel it's being held in." Because, yeah, I had the money, and I was just getting started. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I served mine ice-frozen, with a side of real estate paperwork. The moment I saw the wedding venue listed on the invitation, the Billionaire Grand, Miami Beach, I made a call. I didn't care how exclusive it was. I wanted to know one thing. Was it for sale? Turns out everything's for sale. Especially when the owner's in deep debt and desperate. Within 3 weeks, I had a deal on the table. Within 6, I owned the building. In cash, no loans, no investors. Just me, my lawyer, and a wire transfer that made a grown man sweat. The Billionaire was now mine. And Victor Madden's 3rd wedding. Yeah, it was scheduled for the ballroom. On a date now marked private event under review. I didn't cancel it outright. That would have been too easy. Instead, I made changes, subtle ones. The menu was downgraded. The flowers mysteriously arrived in the wrong color. The power flickered during rehearsal. And the best part, the staff, my staff, was instructed to act like everything was normal, because I wanted him confused, uncomfortable, off balance, not destroyed. Not yet. I booked a suite upstairs under a different name. Ellie came with me. She looked stunning in a sleek navy jumpsuit I'd had tailored for her. She was nervous, but I wasn't. I had waited 13 years for this. The day of the wedding, I stood on the balcony of the penthouse, sipping espresso, watching the chaos below. Guests wandering, vendors panicking, my father pacing the lobby, yelling into his phone. And when he looked up, just for a second, I saw it. Recognition. Not full, not certain. But something in his eyes flickered. I disappeared behind the curtain before he could be sure. That was enough. Because now, he was the one wondering. And that night, when they cut the cake under a dying chandelier and an AC that mysteriously stopped working mid-ceremony, I smiled. The hotel was his palace for a day. But I was the queen who owned the land it stood on. After the wedding, I thought I'd feel satisfied. I didn't. Something in me still burned. Not with anger anymore, but with unfinished business. I didn't want to just haunt his day. I wanted him to know who I was. So I made sure he did. 2 weeks later, I sent a letter to his corporate office. Handwritten, no return address, just one line inside. "You shook the world to leave us." I shook it harder to survive. I signed it with my name, Avery Madden. 3 days later, his assistant called my office asking for a meeting. I agreed. We met at a rooftop bar in Manhattan. Neutral territory. He walked in wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first apartment. Hair silver now, smile rehearsed. But when he saw me sitting there, confident, unshaken, grown, his face twitched. "Avery," he said, like tasting the word hurt. "You look successful." I smiled. "I am. He sat down, looking around like someone was watching. There was a long pause before he asked, "Why now?" I tilted my head. "You mean, why let you see the daughter you threw away after all these years?" He didn't respond. So I leaned in and whispered, "Because I needed you to know. You left me in ashes, and I became the fire." He blinked, hard. Still, no apology, no emotion, just calculation. "I never meant for you to struggle," he said flatly. "You have to understand, it was complicated." "No," I cut in. "You made it complicated. I was a child. You were a grown man who ran from responsibility." He looked like he wanted to argue. But he didn't. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook. "I can make things right," he said. I laughed, loudly. Heads turned. "You think I need your money?" I said. "I own your wedding venue, Victor. I'm richer than you." His face paled. And then, just like that night when I was 8, he stood up and left. No goodbye, no hug, no, "I'm proud of you." But this time, I didn't need it. After he walked away from that rooftop bar, I stayed. Not because I was hurt, not anymore. I stayed to enjoy the moment, the skyline, the cold metal of success under my fingertips, the quiet realization that I'd finally outgrown him. All those years chasing approval, imagining some dramatic reunion where he'd fall to his knees and beg for forgiveness. That was done. That was a little girl's fantasy. What I got instead was better, the truth. He hadn't changed. He was still the same man who left a door swinging open in the middle of the night while his family fell apart behind him. And now, he had to live knowing that the daughter he abandoned had become everything he pretended to be. That night, I opened my journal, the same one I used since I was 13. Inside the back cover, I'd written one sentence when I was still wearing hand-me-downs and sleeping under a leaking ceiling. "One day, I'll be so big he'll have to say my name again." Well, that day came, and he said it. Softly, carefully, like it might bite him back. That page, I tore it out. I didn't need it anymore. The next morning, I updated the About section on my company's website. It used to say something vague like, "Born from adversity." Now it read, "Founded by Avery Madden, entrepreneur, strategist, and proof that blood doesn't define legacy." I stopped hiding my story. I gave interviews. I told the press what I'd survived. I became a speaker at women in business conferences, talking about growing up on food stamps and turning pain into profit. People listened, not because I was special, but because I was real. And the more I told my truth, the lighter I felt. The less space he took up in my mind. Eventually, Ellie asked me, "Do you think Dad ever tells people about you?" I smiled. "I hope not," I said, because I already wrote him out of my story. And in the place he used to stand, I wrote myself. Once I let go of needing anything from him, his apology, his money, even his memory, something inside me unlocked. For the first time in my life, I wasn't building to prove anything. I was building because I could, and I knew exactly who I wanted to build for. Girls like me, the ones with broken homes and big dreams, the ones who showed up to class hungry but still aced the test, the ones working 2 jobs while their classmates were buying designer backpacks, the ones no one believed in, yet. I started small, quiet scholarships, private mentorships, monthly checks sent to single mothers anonymously, but it wasn't enough. So I launched the North Star Initiative, a venture fund exclusively for young women founders from disadvantaged backgrounds. No degree, no connections, no rich uncle. Good, just bring your grit. People laughed at first, said I was being emotional, that I should focus on more scalable investments. But then my first North Star girl, a 19-year-old from Detroit who coded her own app in a public library, sold her startup for $12 million. After that, they stopped laughing. My inbox exploded. Letters from teenage girls who said they watched me on YouTube and realized they weren't crazy for dreaming bigger. Mothers who said they finally felt seen, even teachers who'd had a kid like me and wished they could have done more. And somewhere in all of it, I realized this was the real empire. Not the bank account, not the headlines, not the hotel, them. The girls who would rise because I did, the ones who wouldn't have to go through what I went through alone. Ellie said it best one night when we were sitting on the floor of my penthouse, eating takeout like we used to. "You didn't just rewrite your story," she said. "You gave a pen to everyone who didn't have one." And that's when it hit me. I didn't become a billionaire to get revenge. I became one to replace him, not as a father, but as a future. The building was still there, same cracked bricks, same rusted mailbox, same flickering hallway light that used to terrify me at night. I stood outside for a long time, hands in my pockets, heart heavier than I expected. This was where it all started. The shoebox under the bed. The nights Mum cried behind the bathroom door. The mornings I packed Ellie's school lunch and skipped my own. I didn't come back to brag. I came back to remember. A woman answered the door when I knocked. New tenant. 2 kids in the background, cartoons playing. I introduced myself and offered to rent the unit for double what she paid, just for a few hours. She agreed. I walked in slowly. The air still smelled like dust and boiled rice. My fingers brushed the wall where I used to mark Ellie's height with a pencil. The kitchen, tiny, but it once held a world of pain and hope inside it. I sat at the table, that table, the one where Mom told us he wasn't coming back, the one where I first promised myself I'd never let anyone else decide my worth again. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo of my company's New York headquarters. 32 floors, glass ceilings, a marble lobby with my name on the wall. And then I looked around this space again, not with shame, not with anger, but with gratitude. Because this apartment didn't just raise me, it forged me. I left a note on the kitchen counter before I left, folded, simple, no name, just one sentence. "Someone once survived this place and built an empire, so can you." I didn't need to own the past anymore. I didn't need to erase it. I honored it, then walked away from it. When I got outside, Ellie was waiting by the car. She looked at me and asked, "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'm more than okay." Because in that moment, I wasn't the abandoned daughter anymore. I wasn't the poor girl or the angry one. I was the woman who walked back into her old life and didn't flinch. It happened on a Thursday. I was speaking at a private tech summit in LA. Panel of billionaires, velvet seating, cameras everywhere. The kind of room I used to dream about from that broken apartment floor. After my talk, I stepped off stage and grabbed a glass of water. A man in a navy suit walked up. Early 50s, polished, confident. He looked at me like he already knew something. "Avery Madden," he said, shaking my hand. "I've been waiting to meet you." I gave him a polite smile. "You are?" "James Carver. I worked with your father. For over a decade, I froze. I didn't let it show on my face, but inside, every cell went alert." He continued. "He used to mention you, you know. Not often, but always with a kind of fear. That stopped me." "Fear?" I asked. James chuckled. He said if any of his kids were going to grow teeth, it'd be the one he left behind. He used to joke about it, until you started showing up in Forbes. I didn't know how to respond. I had imagined my father forgetting us completely, erasing us, but to hear that he spoke about me, even as a threat, felt strange. "He's not doing so well," James added, voice lowering, "health-wise, business too. His empire's cracked, lawsuits, bad deals, wrong people." Part of me wanted to smile. The other part? It just felt tired. I asked, "Why are you telling me this?" He shrugged. "Because you're not just a story anymore. You're a symbol, and because I think he always knew you'd win." Then he leaned in and said something I'll never forget. "You weren't his legacy. You were his consequence." He walked away after that, left me standing in a room full of gold-plated lies and billion-dollar smiles. I didn't cry. I didn't feel proud. I just felt done. That man may have been my father, but he was never my foundation. And now, even his consequence was stronger than his whole name. It came in a white envelope with no return address, hand-delivered to my assistant, heavy paper, embossed edges, clean, cold. Inside, Victor Madden has passed. Private ceremony, immediate family only. I read it twice, then once more, slower. No emotion came, no wave, no collapse. Just silence. He died the same way he lived, without warning, without asking permission, and without facing what he left behind. I stared at the RSVP for a long time. Was I immediate family? Was I even a name in the obituary? Ellie sat across from me at the dining table that night. She saw the letter and went quiet. "You going?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I was trying to figure out why I'd go. For closure, for revenge, for the little girl I used to be. I didn't know. But the next morning, I found myself on a plane to Palm Beach. Black coat, no jewelry, no press. Just me and a single flower in my hand, a white poppy. He always liked roses, so I brought the opposite. The funeral was small, quiet, paid mourners in black suits, fake tears, too much perfume. Lacey stood by the casket like she'd lost a lottery ticket, not a husband. No one looked at me. They didn't recognize me. That was fine. I walked to the casket slowly. He didn't look peaceful. He looked unfinished. I leaned down and whispered, "You missed everything." Then I placed the poppy on his chest and walked out without staying for the eulogies. Outside, the air smelled like salt and dead leaves. Ellie was waiting by the car. "Well?" she asked. I shrugged. "He's gone." She nodded. "So what now?" I smiled, not out of joy, but out of understanding. "Now we live, fully, loudly, in a way he never dared to. Because he died surrounded by money, but we were surrounded by meaning. And in the end, I think we both knew which one mattered more. For years, I polished my image. I wore designer suits, spoke in perfect pitch, smiled for magazine covers that captioned me as America's self-made sweetheart, like I'd stumbled into greatness by chance. But behind all of it was the truth. I came from food stamps and eviction notices, from nights without heat, from a man who walked away. And I realized, after the funeral, after the silence settled, that hiding it wasn't strength, it was fear. So I stopped. At my next keynote, I walked on stage with no script, no slides, just the truth. "I'm not a miracle," I said into the mic. "I'm a pattern. And if you study the pattern, you'll see how many girls like me never get the chance to finish their sentence, let alone rewrite their whole story." I told them about the shoebox under my bed, about Ellie crying at night, about my mom burning rice, because the stove's flame wouldn't hold. I told them everything, and the room went still. Afterward, people came up to me in tears. Women, men, even one CEO who said, "My daughter's just like you." I think I owe her an apology. That night, I received over 3,000 emails, but one stood out. It was from a young girl named Brianna, 17, living in a motel with her mother, working night shifts at a laundromat. She wrote, "I thought my story made me unworthy, but then I heard yours." I sat with that for a long time, because I remembered what it felt like to believe you were too damaged to be chosen for anything good. And now here I was, being called inspiration, icon, boss. But those words didn't mean much to me anymore. What mattered was this. I wasn't cleaning up my story for anyone again. Not the media, not investors, not the ghosts of men who left. Because my origin wasn't a stain. It was a spark, and I was done hiding my fire. If there was one person who had carried my weight long before I could walk, it was her, my mother. The woman who held 2 jobs, took night buses, smiled through exhaustion, and never once let me feel like we were losing, even when we were drowning. She had been my armor, my compass, my quiet reason to keep going. And for years I told myself, one day I'll give it all back. That day came sooner than she expected. I flew her to New York without telling her why. Picked her up from the airport myself. She was still wearing the same beige coat she'd had for a decade. Still called me sweetheart in public like I was 5. "Where are we going?" she asked. "You'll see," I said, trying not to cry. We pulled up to a townhouse on 73rd Street, 6 stories, limestone facade, garden terrace, the kind of place that once only existed in the dreams we didn't dare speak out loud. "Is this a hotel?" she asked. "No," I said, handing her a gold key. "It's yours." She stared at me like I'd spoken another language. I walked her inside. The staff greeted her by name. The kitchen was stocked with her favorite teas. The upstairs closet already had dresses in her size. And on the fireplace mantel, I had framed an old photo of the 3 of us, me, her, and Ellie, on that broken couch back in the apartment we used to call home. She touched it with trembling fingers. "Is this real?" she whispered. "All of it," I said, "and it's long overdue." She didn't say much, just sat on the velvet chair by the window and stared out at the skyline. Then finally, she looked at me with wet eyes and said, "I used to pray you'd make it. But this is more than I ever dreamed." I knelt beside her and held her hand. "You are the dream, Mom," I said. "Everything I built. It's because you never let me forget who I was, even when the world tried to erase me." She smiled, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I'd finally come home. It was a Tuesday morning. I was reviewing contracts when my assistant walked in, pale-faced, holding the office line. "There's someone on the phone. Says she's your half-sister." I froze. Not Ellie. His other daughter, from one of his later marriages. I took the call. Her voice was soft, careful. "Hi, Avery. I'm Lily. I know this is weird. I know you don't owe me anything. But I found your name in some old documents after the funeral. And I've been reading about you, watching interviews. I had to call." I didn't know what to say. This was the part of the story I never thought I'd meet. She continued, "He never talked about you." "Not really, just once, when he was drunk. He said, 'She's the one who made it without me.' That hit different. Not because it was praise, but because he remembered. He was cold," she added, "distant. I thought something was wrong with me, but now I think, maybe he was just broken." I swallowed hard. "Lily, I'm sorry you went through that." There was a pause, then, "Can I meet you?" Part of me wanted to say no. I didn't owe anyone a seat at my table just because we shared a last name. But then I remembered being that girl, piecing together scraps of someone else's story, trying to understand why you weren't enough to be chosen. So I said yes. We met at a small cafe in Brooklyn. She was barely 20, nervous, clutching a chipped notebook full of questions. She looked nothing like me, but her eyes, they held the same sadness I once carried. We talked for hours, not about him, about us, about what it meant to grow up chasing shadows, about building a life with no blueprint. At the end, she said something I'll never forget. "You made it possible for someone like me to believe I could start over." I hugged her tightly, because maybe this was the full circle moment I never expected. Not finding a father, but finding someone else he left behind, and choosing to be the family he never was. The offer came in a sleek black envelope, hand-delivered by a man in a 3-piece suit who barely blinked. Victor Madden's legal estate. They were dissolving what remained of his once mighty empire. And I was the first name on the list. Apparently, he'd left me something in his will. I opened the letter slowly, half expecting it to be a joke, or worse, a final insult. But it was real. Ownership, control, full access, his shares, his buildings, his board seat at Madden Global. My father, the man who abandoned me with nothing but silence, had decided, in death, to hand me everything he once believed I didn't deserve. Ellie read over my shoulder. "Are you going to take it?" I didn't answer right away, because part of me wanted to burn it all. Level the empire he built on lies, vanity, and the backs of forgotten children. But another part, the part that knew boardrooms better than therapy, whispered something else. What if I didn't destroy it? What if I redefined it? So I scheduled a meeting with the board, walked into the marble tower that once wouldn't even let me in the lobby. They looked at me like a ghost, or maybe a reckoning. "Victor's daughter," one man said, standing awkwardly. "No," I corrected him, taking my seat at the head of the table. "I'm Avery Madden, the woman who rebuilt herself from your founder's fallout." Silence. Then I laid out my terms. The company would be restructured, a third of profits redirected into education and funding for girls from underserved communities, environmental audits, transparent salaries, no more dirty real estate deals under shell corporations. One man scoffed, "This wasn't your father's vision." I smiled. Exactly. They tried to vote me out. They failed. I held the majority share. And just like that, I inherited the very kingdom that once exiled me. But I didn't wear his crown. I melted it down and used the gold to write checks to a future he never imagined. Because I wasn't there to finish his work. I was there to end it and begin something better. They said his office hadn't been touched since he died. Same leather chair, same glass desk, same massive portrait of himself on the wall. Younger, smug, full of ego. I stood there alone, just me and the ghost of a man who thought money could outlive truth. The view was incredible. 52nd floor, skyline bleeding into the ocean. The same view he used to look out at while pretending we didn't exist. And now, I was the one behind the desk. His final will had included a controlling share of Madden Global, not just as a handout, but as a twisted inheritance. One last test. One last reach for redemption. Either way, the power was now mine. His board wasn't happy. They saw me as a disruption, an outsider, a problem wearing heels and a pulse. But I knew the numbers better than any of them. I knew the rot beneath the marble, the lawsuits, the offshore accounts, the creative accounting they'd gotten away with for decades. I called my own meeting. No notice, no agenda. They filed in with smug grins and hollow respect, until I slid the folder across the table. Inside, a full audit, my audit, conducted quietly by my team. Fraud, misconduct, ethics violations. Enough dirt to bury them in the same silence they once buried us. "I'm not here to continue Victor Madden's empire," I said calmly. "I'm here to clean up what he left behind." Silence, tension, fear. I fired 3 executives on the spot, replaced them with women I'd mentored through North Star, women who knew the grind, women who earned it. By the end of the week, the company was no longer his. It was ours. I stood in his office one last time before the movers came, took down his portrait with my own hands, rolled it up, shipped it to storage. I hung a new frame in its place. It was a photo of me, Ellie, and Mom, sitting on the couch in that old apartment, eating rice and laughing at nothing. The real origin story. Not money, not legacy, resilience. And now, it would hang above the city he used to rule, as a reminder of the daughter who came back and rewrote everything. Power was never the goal, freedom was. And now that I had it, real, unshakable freedom, I didn't want to just grow his scraps into something bigger. I wanted to create something entirely my own. So I stepped away from Madden Global 6 months after taking control. I didn't sell it, I didn't burn it down. I handed it off to a team of brilliant women who once sat at the margins of the business world. I gave them the keys and walked away. Because I was ready to build a new world, not from vengeance, from vision. I called it Echo. A platform, a movement, a tech-driven network designed to amplify overlooked voices, young entrepreneurs, artists, activists, inventors, people like me, people like Mom, like Ellie, like Lily. Echo wasn't about climbing the ladder. It was about flipping it sideways so we could walk together. We launched with 10 founders, then 20, then 100. By the end of year one, Echo was valued at $600 million. But more importantly, it had created real change, funded 38 first-generation startups, provided housing to 240 single mothers, trained over 3,000 teenage girls in coding, finance, negotiation. No one asked where I went to school. No one cared about my last name. They just saw results. And they saw themselves. I hosted summits, not in ballrooms, but in gymnasiums, rec centers, rooftops in neighborhoods like the one I grew up in. I didn't speak from a podium. I sat in circles. I listened. Because this time, I wasn't the only one who made it out. I was pulling others with me. Ellie ran our creative division. Lily ran our youth fellowship. Mom came to every major launch. She never stopped crying when she watched me speak. And I never stopped holding her hand after. This wasn't about proving him wrong anymore. It was about proving us right, that we could come from nothing and still build everything. I'd been on magazine covers before. Forbes, Fast Company, Entrepreneur. They called me the billionaire daughter who beat the odds, or the beauty and brains behind Echo. They got the numbers right, they got the headline clicks, but they never really got me. Until one reporter, a young woman from a small local paper in the Bronx, asked for an interview no one else had. I almost said no, but then I saw her pitch. Not a profile, not a puff piece. I want to tell the story from the ground up, as if your past mattered as much as your empire. I said yes. We met in the old neighborhood, not in a hotel or a studio. She asked questions no one else dared to. How did it feel to be left? Did you ever hate your father? Do you still dream about that apartment? I answered everything. For the first time, I didn't package my pain. I let it bleed. And when the piece came out, it wasn't flashy. No gold fonts, no airbrushed cover shot, just a black and white photo of me standing in front of our old building, hands in pockets, eyes steady. The headline read, "She was left with nothing." Now she teaches others. They never needed permission to begin. It went viral overnight, not because I was rich, but because I was real. Women from around the world sent letters. A mother in South Africa, a teacher in Kansas, a girl from Lebanon who had lost everything in a bombing and still found the courage to learn how to code. They didn't call me boss or queen or icon. They called me sister, and that meant more than all the wealth I'd ever earned. Because when the truth finally reached the world, the whole truth, I realized something powerful. It was never about the money. It was about the mirror, about showing people what's possible when you stop hiding your scars and start building with them. It was the same chipped brick building, same rusty fence, same loud bell echoing through the halls like it was still 2007. I stood at the entrance of my old public high school, the place where I used to hide in the back of the classroom, hoping no one would notice the holes in my shoes. Back then, no one asked where I came from. No one cared why I was tired, why I never ate lunch, why my eyes always looked 10 years older than my body. I wasn't the star student, I was the invisible one. Now, they had banners up. Welcome back, Avery Madden. A red carpet, news cameras, a marching band. Principal Vargas, the same man who once scolded me for skipping lunch to work extra hours, shook my hand like we were old friends. Funny how quickly they remember you once you have headlines. But I wasn't there for them. I walked into the auditorium packed with students, girls who looked like Ellie, boys who reminded me of the kids who used to laugh when I wore the same hoodie 3 days in a row. I stepped up to the mic, took a breath and said, "You don't have to come from money to create value. You don't have to be seen to be powerful, and you don't have to wait to be chosen. You can choose yourself. I told them everything. About the shoebox savings, the motel nights, the wedding I crashed by buying the hotel. They laughed, gasped, even cried. But when I said, I used to sit in that third row, too scared to raise my hand, the room went still. Because they finally saw it. The empire wasn't built from genius. It was built from them. After the talk, a girl in oversized glasses came up to me, maybe 15. She looked nervous. Do you think I could ever do something like you did? She asked. I bent down, looked her dead in the eye, and said, You already are. The difference is, this time, someone's watching. Because I swore I'd never forget who I used to be, and now I was coming back, to hold the door open behind me. It was quiet when I got home that night. No cameras, no speeches, no boardroom deals waiting. Just the soft hum of city lights outside my window, the warmth of a cup of tea in my hands, and the kind of peace I used to believe was only for other people. Ellie was asleep in the guest room. Mom had texted me a heart emoji and good night, my lioness. I sat on the balcony, overlooking the skyline, thinking about all the versions of myself I had carried and shed. The scared little girl who listened to her father's footsteps vanish into the night. The teenager counting change under flickering lights. The 20-something woman building an empire while the world kept calling her lucky. They all lived inside me. But now I was something else. I was the person I used to wish for. The one who showed up. The one who stayed. Not perfect, but whole. I didn't become a billionaire to be powerful. I became one to be free. Free to write my own story. Free to break cycles. Free to show every kid like me that survival is not the ceiling. It's the floor. I looked at my phone. The lock screen was a photo of that old apartment, side by side with the new one we bought Mom. A reminder that nothing is impossible, just unseen. Then I opened the Notes app and typed something for no one else but me. He left, but I stayed, and that made all the difference. Because my story didn't end with abandonment, it didn't end with wealth, it ended with becoming. And the final chapter, it wasn't revenge. It was rest, it was peace, it was legacy, not in what I built, but in who I chose to become when no one believed I could. And in that silence, under the stars of the city I once feared, I smiled for no one. Because this time, the victory was mine alone.